on. It's just a placeholder that's there every meeting, I think.
Because we're meeting live now, and we're going by hybrid, so all of those formats are open at this point in time.
Okay, but I don't have to, there's no rule that says I have to read that out loud. Okay, great. So we'll go from there and go straight to public comments. Is there anybody here to speak from the public? Yep. Seeing nobody here to speak on the public, we'll move to the next, which is approval of the meetings from the March 23rd meeting.
I just sent that out, so you might want to wait until the next meeting. Sorry, I was doing the template and all that stuff, so
Okay,
it's pretty basic, but we could do that next meeting.
so we will defer that to the next meeting. All right, so now we're moving on to new business, review of the proposed meeting schedule. We did get that on Friday. Did everybody get that? Get a chance to review it? Do we have any issues right away?
May 2nd will be an issue for me.
An issue, Zoom, in person, both?
Both, I'll be in the woods and the cats
Okay.
come out.
Can't zoom in?
Other than that, I think I can try, it'll be interesting.
What do we have for May 2nd?
May 2nd is specific to the Budget Committee as of now, unless we move faster than what's on the agenda. But no other,
I think we're all going to
Other
have various
issues?
times. I think we just need
yeah,
to
I
keep pushing
think we just
through,
need to
so.
keep going, and, I mean, these identified the known conflicts that we had, and I guess as we just run into future conflicts, if it's just, as long as most of us are here, I think we're going to be good. Okay. And you can see the agenda here as it's laid out, but I think that's all subject to change. That was just sort of a timeline to be able to keep us on track. Ideally, what we do need to do is we need to be ready at the absolute latest to present the recommendations to City Council at the July 19th meeting, which, in my conversations with Larissa, requires us to be done. We have to have our public hearing, and then there needs to be a certain number of days, and then the City Council needs to have public hearing, and then a certain number of days again. So we need to get done by mid-June or so in order to meet this July 19th date. So that's why that's out there. All right. So the agenda is meant to meet that. Next on the agenda is discuss methods of communication with the public. I did see the button on the city website.
So I talked to the communications director about creating a separate Facebook page. That would be extremely problematic. It has to be attached to somebody, right? So we have the administrative page. The other aspect about that was getting a sufficient following there. So it takes time to get people to find that page and start following it and making comments. So did several things. We can push the information on the city's administrative page. I talked with Bill Boddy, our IT director. So he's creating. I haven't looked to see if it's there yet, but so you're going to go to the front page of the city's web page, and on the right-hand side is where we have the most prevalent, most recent things. So there'll be Charter Review Committee, will be a header there. You click that. There'll be a separate page set up for the Charter Review Committee. We're going to use that as the depository. So, and there'll also be an email form that you can submit comments, concerns, suggest items, and such under that will be up there. Oh, there it is. So is the page there already?
That's the email button, right?
Yep. So send your comments and suggestions for the amendments. So what we're going to do is those will come through. We'll gather those for you and make it part of your packet. So when we convert those, we'll put those into your packet, be converted to a PDF like you're getting now. And all of those PDF documents will be posted here on this page, so it preserves the public record. Everybody can see that's coming in. It keeps the specific emails off your personal devices, right? So that you'll get those ahead of time when we push the packet back out to you for the subsequent meeting. The record will be preserved here. Public can go and click that and see the information and such.
Assuming that nearly no one is watching these meetings, how do we solicit that then?
Right, so I can have Jordan put a specific push out on the city's administrative Facebook page. We can do a press release to Zendel. I'll talk about it under the manager's report, and/or maybe the mayor will at the next council meeting for not this Tuesday, but next Tuesday, to spread the word about the fact that the Charter Review Committee is ongoing, and describe this process as to where people can make comment.
Okay.
Zendel already had it in one of her posts or emails that was sent out recently. Can they put a link to the actual charter on this page? Because Diane Conley made a comment on
It is hard to find.
the main page. I mean, I found it fairly easily, Googling it,
But
but,
if you're not savvy,
oh, I know.
yeah.
I know.
It would be better to have a click.
So talk to me about, because I thought it was very helpful looking at the minutes from the Charter Commission, but likely if we post that there, it's going to be confusing, as people might think that's what's ongoing right now, and it's
I
not.
think
So-
I think
No,
he's just
just
looking
the
for
charter.
the charter, a
Just
link to the
charter.
charter
I
itself.
understood
Current
that,
charter.
but I was just asking if you, I'm sorry, I won't speak the French there. If you wanted a link to the past minutes from the Charter Commission, okay.
I don't think so.
No.
I think that would be confusing.
I think so, yeah. It would, yeah, unnecessary, and it's, only marginally relevant, I think, to what we're doing. But I think a link to the charter itself is a good idea on that page. And then, so we would have the option to share that on our own pages or whatever, just, with no comment, just the sharing that it's there. Okay.
But I thought,
Counselor Stackpole has his hand up.
Sorry, I can never see that. Thank you.
Yeah, and that's okay, Mr. Chair.
a negative.
I didn't want to interrupt the thinking process here, but one of my quick suggestions here for the charter actually is to create what we used to call in the old days a hyperlinked document. But by that, what I mean is you take the table of contents that's in the beginning of the charter, you turn those all into hyperlinks, or just links as we might think of them, that are linked to the actual wording in the document. Let me see if I've got, so in other words, if you were looking at something, if you were interested in something related to budget, you could scroll down through the table of contents in the charter, find the section in the table of contents that's related to budget, click on that, and it would take you to the section in the charter related to budget, rather than having to scroll through and look and match pages and things like that. It's pretty common practice, and I'm sure our media person is probably understands completely what I'm talking about, and given time would be able to do this. So it would make it a lot easier so look at section 101 just real simply, or let's so you click on that and it takes you right to the article itself. Now, Steve, are you doing that to help me out, or is it already done?
Larissa is, so,
I've set this up already.
right, so
Okay,
we have the bookmarked PDF already ready, so we'll just put that
Okay.
onto the page. Yep.
All right, so it's done already, so you upload. I think it would be helpful if you could do that as a PDF or something, Larissa. I think Steve mentioned you did that, so that counselors also can just click on the table of contents, bingo, go right to that area in the charter. I think it would just make it a lot simpler for everybody.
So when I actually did this charter, that was set up that way, but the multiple times it's been edited and stuff, it just disappeared. So
Yeah.
I'm sure it's not if I could do it, it's not difficult.
So I set this PDF up for the use of this committee. It's included in your packet, and I will post this on the website as well, on the page that we created.
And it's already got the PDF there, and it's already got the links on it.
Exactly.
Great,
Yep.
great, thank you. Yep.
Awesome, thank you. So we were still on the,
Soliciting.
we're on the soliciting of community feedback. Do we have any other comments on that, or do we need any more from the city manager on that? It seems, I just want to make sure that residents at least know that they have the opportunity to provide feedback. I'm not anticipating that
You'll
we
use-
get a lot.
We'll use the city Facebook page to link everybody to the feedback form, right?
Yep,
And
so on the
in that
Facebook
way.
page, you'll have the link, so you'll be able to hit it there, and it'll take you to that page on the city's website. And I know, once Jordan pushes that out again this week, Zendel will write another story that now those new resources are available and such. The Sanford Springvale News is a tremendous resource for us now, just a tremendous resource, so.
Yep.
I think we could send a letter to every resident in the city, and somebody would still complain that they weren't notified.
Yep. Yep. This is as good as we can do.
I hate to say that, but
You know, and if we chose, and I'll probably share it to my own group or whatever, but
Yeah, I don't think there's been an outcry over changes to the charter, so I wouldn't be shocked if we didn't get a lot of feedback.
I think that.
I don't, I
I
don't,
know some of the things people are worried about, and it comes back to the process for referendums and overturning stuff, and, you know, people are still upset about the orange bag situation, they're still upset that it takes 25% of the prior gubernatorial in order to make the election valid for something. There's a lot of that stirring out there.
we're aware of those concerns, and I think the people that have those concerns that feel most strongly about it are going to find a way to reach us anyway. But I want all the members of the community, everybody, even if they don't take advantage of it, I want everybody to at least know that they were solicited and that they have an easy way to be able to provide the feedback. So it suffices for me if it works for the rest of the group. Okay. Next on the agenda discusses Articles 1 through 4 and identify potential changes. So last week we talked about going through this section by section, and I think we do want to do that. But what I want to propose, sort of as a guideline for what we do, is to move through section by section, identify areas in which we think we might want to make changes. And so at this point, you don't have to decide for yourself, and I don't think we as a committee need to decide for ourselves whether we actually want to make a change. I think for me, it's just to identify potential changes first, and we can just kind of list them as we go, not really make commentary, and then when we get to the end, depending on the time that we have, then we can come back and start revisiting those items. What I'm picturing is not making any final decisions on any of these sections or articles. I don't expect us to get through Articles 1 through 4 today and say this is a change to the wording that we're going to do in each of these sections, and this is how it's going to be, because for me, some of these sections tie into other sections. And so I sort of want to get through the whole document, at least in a cursory form first, and then come back at the end after we've sort of had discussion on all the sections and have narrowed it down to the sections that we might want to change, to then go back and make final decision. Does that sound okay with everybody? Yeah, okay. So for the public, Steve, do I need to, so if I'm going to go right into section 101, do I need to read it out loud? Can we just have it on the screen as I'm going? I can just reference section 101.
I've asked Larissa to, as the committee's talking about whatever
Yeah,
section.
I don't want to.
We'll keep it up on the screen so the
Okay.
public can see that as well.
Awesome. So we're going to move pretty quickly on areas that we don't have comment on. Again, what I'm going to propose is that I'll reference section 101 if we can get that up on the screen. I'm going to ask if anybody has any changes to make. If we don't, we're just going to move on, and then I'll go to section 102. Sound okay? And then if we do have changes to make, we can have brief discussion and kind of go from there. That'll give Maura a chance to be able to use her computer and take notes.
My computer, I forgot.
I know. All right, section 101.
No pencil. Preamble, no.
Are we going to see that on the screen? Oh, it's right there. Okay, I'm sorry. I was expecting to see it differently. I got it. So section 101, any comment?
Nope. None here?
All right, we are moving at record pace. Section 102, powers of the city.
Just some of the stuff that no longer needs to be there, I
Yeah,
guess.
so I had written down
Municipal budget.
repetitiveness. What's that?
the municipal budget, which is no longer approved by the
Right,
voters,
yeah.
unless you think that
Except the
may
school
change.
budget is.
So where are you reading,
Last
Jack?
sentence, paragraph 2.
All right, paragraph 2, I have that highlighted as well. All legislative powers of the city shall be vested in the city council, except that the municipal budget and school budget shall be adopted by the voters as provided in Article 7 of this charter. So way to get to a key topic in
Well,
our
and-
second section.
I think it's going to depend a lot on what we fix in the budget
The budget,
section.
yep.
And this is one of those triggers where people are like, oh, you're going to take it back from us when it basically, this section has become different because the charter morphed it. The charter itself caused it to happen, and the process of the charter itself. So,
And just to stop you for a second, does everybody know what we're talking about?
Yeah, and I thought that was state law. I thought that was state statute.
no, the city budget, it was adopted by the voters until you got to a point where not enough people showed up. To go to
25%.
25% to actually adopt the budget every year, and then it caused it to disappear. The whole section 6, right, for the budget?
Well, so this section is under 704, repeal the validation of referendum process. So the process was, it was a 5-year evolutionary period from the time the charter passed. So in section 704, it set forward a process whereby the city clerk validated each election, how many voters and what percentage of those the registered voters pursuant to the gubernatorial election had voted, right, in each one of those 5 municipal elections. And at the end of that 5th-year period of time, it was certified that less than 25% of the public had participated. So therefore, the charter that we operate under now said then it's going to sunset because there's not enough citizens' participation in there pursuant to the sunset of the referendum process.
And that's where a lot of people are angry at that.
Well, but I look back through, it was interesting to read in the Charter Commission, a lot of this was set up because of lack of participation. They couldn't get people to participate.
Couldn't get people to town meeting? Yep.
So the evolution was, Maura, you know
Yep.
more than I, but the evolutionary process was, well, okay, so under this new process, we'll test it yet again for citizens petition. They didn't meet the 25%, and so it's sunset.
But
So-
even if they voted it,
Right.
even if they voted it down, they didn't have the 25%, it still passed, right?
That's right.
And, even for town meeting, you'd go into the polls and it'd be vote for no more than 10, and there'd be 3 names on the ballot.
Well, when we originally, in the 2002 Charter Commission, we reset the town meeting membership, and we lowered it to what was standard participation. And then as we moved forward from 2002 to this charter committee, no, we couldn't get people for that lower standard number. This is how many people show up, let's make it that number instead of this higher number. And we were having trouble making that, which Sue remembers. And so we're like, why are we doing this town meeting when nobody seems to want to even put their name out there to go? We couldn't even get, even when we appointed them, we couldn't get enough people. We were hoping we had a quorum every
Well,
single
usually the
time.
wardens had to call around and try and,
Right, because we needed a quorum, and Sue remembers, I see the city clerk is here for anybody online, but, yep.
So to me,
Mr. Chair, I have a couple of comments on this.
sure, go ahead.
So a couple of things, jogging my memory, along with Maura's. One of them I think we need to consider is elections cost money. And I think the previous Charter Commission was mindful of that. We weren't trying to eliminate this at all, but we were mindful of the fact that if it's just, I hate to say waste, but if it's just a small number of people, it's kind of a waste of resources, and I'm speaking specifically to people resources and money resources. So that one consideration. The other consideration really was, I'm going to say one of my greater concerns, and that is you could get under the original charter article here, you could get a very small group of people who could overturn the budget. In other words, I'll use the term hijack the budget and hijack the budget process. So we want participation. I'm not opposed to having participation at all and a vote, but I don't want a small number of people. Personally, I don't want a small number of people, which would be very easy to do and even easier than 10 years ago with Facebook and other things, getting together and a small percentage of the voting public overturn the budget and basically hijack the budget process. So if we had participation, this would have continued. But the fact that we have a historically low participation in this, I think we need to be mindful of these couple of things, because I think part of that is what was rooted behind having this sunset.
Thank you.
I agree with that on the municipal budget, but on the school budget, I believe there's a process, that's what I was talking about,
We-
that's dictated by state law.
We have no control on that
That's what I
side.
was talking about.
And I've got the reference in here for this.
Yeah,
It's
so I don't
Yeah,
think we can change that.
We cannot.
Okay,
So
that's
we-
what I was
with-
referring
Is
to, not
is
the
it up for
municipal.
vote
Right.
this year?
It's up for vote again this year.
So we have to put a vote every 3 years? Every
3 years, yeah.
Asking people if they want to get rid of it.
And then even if they voted this year to eliminate that, 3 years after, you give them the opportunity to vote to put it back in or to keep it out every 3 years. Governor Baldacci set that up. So Baldacci set that up. That was a quid pro quo. So municipalities were asking for more, back then, general purpose aid, GPA, now it's EPS. They were asking for more aid for education because the citizens had voted for 55% funding. They're asking for that. And municipalities are screaming about him robbing money out of municipal revenue sharing. He put the LD1 calculation in place, and he said, okay, if we're going to give you inefficient, untrustworthy municipalities more money, right? I will say, I've got
Oh, I remember it too.
so many issues, right?
How do you feel about
So if we're
this?
going to give you more money, right, then we have to hold your feet to the fire. So the LD1 calculation came in, so you had to prove that you were using the money in the appropriate way. And the other flip side of that was, if you're going to get more school funding, the people get to vote on that budget, not you as counselors or something like that. That was.
Well, it's interesting they made it every 3 years, because every 3 years you're going to have nothing, there's going to be nothing on the ballot except that one question, because if it's in June.
So the school department pays that cost, right?
To have 300 people vote,
Yep.
Yeah.
and I have to pay workers for all polling places.
And the vote, so the vote is coming up this year, and the vote is positioned as such. Do you want to continue to have the right to vote on the school budget?
Yes.
So this is an interesting conversation because our clerk had proposed to put additional language in there, better informing the voters of, a yes vote on this, the cost that it entails and such into that, and legal said, absolutely not. That's influencing the election.
It is.
So somehow the public has to be informed, but we can't use the ballot to do that. I can't speak about that. I can't go out and campaign the community, stop, it's inefficient, costs a lot of money, and you're having that approved or disapproved by a very, very, very small percentage of people.
And
the
so,
other-
But
just
you
another
could take
note-
this, you could take this out still, even though it's still at the school budget, because the school budget is determined by state law.
Right.
It is no longer determined by the charter. The charter would have gotten rid of it by the 25% threshold if it could have. So we could still take that sentence out, which is what your question is, and it doesn't impact it because state law takes control.
Yeah, it's in there further down.
Yeah.
Just another comment on the history, as I remember it. The other thing that Baldacci did is created the school administrative units that consolidated a lot of schools. It didn't affect us. So for us, Sanford is a school unit.
Yep.
For other communities, you had maybe half a dozen communities. You had a school board, and there were complaints that there was uneven representation that was causing taxation in a different community, so they wanted these votes. But for Sanford,
It's
it
usually
doesn't
done quick.
apply, because the representation is all from Sanford, and the
Right.
school is in Sanford.
Right.
So I was so angry, I was in Augusta at that period of time because there were 5 school districts that were studied statewide. The 5 most efficient school districts statewide. I represented Caribou at that time, was one of the 5 that was studied for efficiencies, and they destroyed our school department and forced us in with 8 other communities. All of that failed. We ended up consolidating with 3, and our costs went up.
Wow.
So I carry a lot of angst on this topic.
so to sort of frame this discussion, this is, I think this would flow through to other decisions that we're going to make in other, in other parts of this. And really, we could go in my broad mind, we could go one of 3 ways. We could leave it as it currently sits, number one. We could try to have language that restores the right to the vote on the municipal side. Or we could say, Or we could take it out, and we could just take out the whole thing, and we don't vote on the municipal budget at all anymore. Right?
Yeah, you could remove the old language.
Could remove the old language in there and not even reference having that. And
Yeah,
I'm not saying a right or wrong at this point.
School is covered in section 704, so there'd be no need to be repetitive if you pulled the municipal budget.
So I'm going to recommend when we get there, I've got the state titles, the 28 references, I'm going to reference those for you when we get to those sections.
Okay.
That should be the prevailing language.
Well, that's what we reference it anyway.
Yeah.
So, one last overarching comment. So as I read through the Charter Review Commissions and as I understand Sanford's evolution of their charters, right? It is about going from a pure democratic form of government where one vote per person per town meeting format to a representative democracy whereby the people are electing their representatives, not different than state government and county government and such, to be the voice in the legislative body. So that's the overarching thing that as I've continued to read through the charter as to where on that needle, I know where we sit today, where do we propose that we set in this, pursuant to these recommendations?
Well, again, to continue that conversation, the whole budget thing, in order to bring it to vote, constitutes a ton of work, a ton of inefficiency in a lot of things. There is time that could probably be spent in working on other parts of the budget. And so you can certainly make a case to say the budget doesn't necessarily have to be in the hand of one vote per voter, and where you're really holding accountability is on the city council or whoever's developing
There
the
you
budget.
go. That's what you just said is extremely important because underneath all of this, again, I don't want to include more, so I'm just going to say myself, she can agree or not. I think another one of the underlying pushes here with the Charter Commission, and just so people understand, I was the chair, Maura was, I believe, the secretary, very involved, so I'm not stepping in here to overstep her authority or understanding of the process. But one of the underarching things was to consolidate responsibility for where the buck stops. In my mind, let's say, the budget process just kind of went on and on and on without, if you think it through, nobody really had responsibility for the budget. Under this process, if you take out the referendum, then the city council is where the buck stops. And my feeling on that is if you don't like the way I vote on the budget, then you might need to consider voting me out and getting somebody on the council who votes the way you want to. Let's say I'm too liberal and I'm giving away all this money and it's creating all this controversy. If I'm that out of line with what the community wants, they need to vote me out and vote somebody in who feels their way. So that was the idea. The buck stops with the city council. The compromise was to give the community the years to have before we would eliminate the referendum vote. And, we gave it a chance. The community, for whatever reason, didn't meet the baseline here. And then I think appropriately, the responsibility for the budget passes to the city council through the budget committee. Okay, and we're going to discuss all that later on. But that was also some of the underpinnings for why we put this wording in, and eventually things went the way that they were. Okay. So maybe I'm a bit precautionary, but I've seen too many school budget votes that you have just make up the number, $25 million budget. And through, everybody knows what I'm talking about, 6-town community, you have 1,200 people, if that, 600 people sometimes passing budgets. And I think that's a pretty precarious situation for the municipal people to be in. I understand state law. And I also think regarding that, we should get Superintendent Nelson's opinion on that. I think he's been pretty adamant that he doesn't want to give this up, the vote for a school. So we need to get his comment, I'm sure, which will come later on. But
Well, we can't give
so-
up the vote for school, that's a
Right.
state process.
Right, but whether they've had referendums before, and I've never got the sense that either Superintendent Theoharides or Superintendent Nelson that that process bothers them. I mean, they're very happy to have that in place. I think they feel that that's needed on the school side. My opinion. As I said, we've got to solicit that from Superintendent Nelson.
Yeah.
But I think on the municipal side, this is what the town was, in my opinion, sorely lacking. Where does the buck stop with the budget? Who takes responsibility for it?
Right.
You know, and it was the people. But when you say, how come our taxes are going up? Did you blame the people for taxes going up? No. And if you think of the old process with so on and so forth, I'm not going to go through it. It was, you know, I used to do one of these. Who's responsible for this? And so now we have a system where the city council is responsible, and the city councilors are responsible, and I think that's needed. But all right, I'll be quiet now.
That's okay. You know, and I understand that point of view. As a counter argument to it, not saying pro or con, the process you used yourself. So the process to vote you out as a citizen, I might feel like that takes too long for me to feel heard. So, again, not commenting right or wrong on that, but there's two different points of view that I think we
Sure.
have to kind of consider on that. I think one
Sure.
way around that is to, you know, to have more year-round discussions of the budget, to have the community be more engaged through the whole process. You know, perhaps there's a scenario where the public doesn't feel quite so much of a need to cast their vote on this thing that, honestly, most of us don't understand, including myself, if we understood the process that the council or whoever was going through in order to set the budget. So there's different ways we could look at that as we go through. But this is a topic that we've identified that we can come back to.
Yeah, and I just have one further question on that, and I'm not saying that I think it's good we vote on it. I don't. I think it may be a waste of money, but because this would not effectively, but in the charter, shift some of the legislative power to the council, would this go beyond what an amendment would be? I wouldn't think it would, but I think we need to ask that.
Yeah, my general understanding is anytime that you change the current power structure, that would become a revision.
And would this change the power structure?
The change of
No longer voting, so you'd be shifting the
No.
legislative powers. Here it gives an exception to the municipal budget and school budget shall be adopted by voters as provided in Article 7 of this charter. We'd be
But I think in
taking-
Article 7, we've already given it up.
704, there was a sunset provision.
Yes.
So the charter provided for that, and now it is wholly vested in the council
So
now.
we can take that
That was a
language
fi-
out?
that
That
was-
would simply be.
That's your choice.
One option would be to take the language out. Another option would be to have an amendment that would add language, right? So those are things that we could,
Yep.
that we'll
Yeah,
get
so
to.
because the charter already adjusted it, it's not, it would be considered a minor thing, right?
So back to section 102, another possible topic of conversation, not saying it is, city council's made up of 7 members. Do we want to have any conversation around that?
They're
No,
working.
Well, so it's
It
been
works,
discussed,
right?
7 versus 9.
Right.
Please don't go back to 5.
Does anybody feel any sort of
I don't,
urgency on that topic?
as long as it's,
We
we
could-
feel like it's working.
Mr. Chair, it's worth mentioning that we did move from 5 to 7 under the previous charter. So we did increase representation
In
there.
2002, yeah.
Okay. Yep, I had it highlighted as just a topic that we could discuss, so. Any other items under section 102? Well, I can repeat it.
Any considerations instead of all of the members
In the 2002 charter, we discussed that extensively, and we realized that because we have a section of town that, like, at the time, barely sent anybody to town meeting as it was, and nobody ever seemed to want to run, we were afraid we'd have so much trouble getting people just to run from that particular section of town, that it was better just to get the best people we could from the entire community. I also think it sets up, I find people who vote by ward, it's problematic. They have good representation, good people running from certain wards, and they're struggling to find anybody to run from other wards.
Did the people on the Zoom hear the question?
No, we did not.
Okay, that's what maybe you do, that was a lot for me to try to repeat. I'm sorry. I just want
Wondering if we
the
should
question
elect-
noted.
We should elect by wards, sections of town, members to the city council.
I just posed that question because I personally, as city clerk, have received phone calls from residents if they have an issue. Who is my representative in town that I complain to? They're all elected at large, your city councilors. This is the list of them. You can contact any one of them. There isn't one specifically for your area in Springvale or in South Sanford or here in town. Where you're reviewing it, I just threw that out there.
In your experience, is that a significant issue? Do you get this often?
A few times a year, but
Okay.
when they realize that they don't have one representative,
Yep.
that it's the pool of them,
Okay.
they seem satisfied.
Thank you. I mean, thank you for bringing it up, because that's all we're doing right now is identifying possible things that we might
I think we have
want to talk
people
about.
moving into the community who are coming from larger communities. Like, my sister lives in Boston, and she knows her rep, but she's she lives in a city that's larger than the entire state of Maine. So that makes sense. In a community where you have, 24,000 people, I mean, we're smaller than a ward would be in the city of Boston. So, we're smaller than a House district, I suspect, or definitely smaller than a Senate district in the state of Maine, so.
I think if I'm not wrong, that specific topic comes up in another later article as well, the representative by ward, or like one of the later ones, sections over 1,000, I can't remember, but we can come back to that one as well. I'm going to move forward to section 103. Any comments?
Yep, just a moment.
You do, Steve? Nope.
Well, I had one more comment on 102. So
Okay.
throughout 102, it's the first time that it's calling out the city. So there's no definition of what the city is. So we're a municipal corporation, we're a political subdivision of the state. If I go into Title 30A, so please remember that 30A, if you don't have a charter, 30A is the state law for the conduct of business for counties and cities/towns. Under 30A, I have it open here. Under Section 2001, you have definitions in here. Talks about municipality means a city or town, except as provided in Chapter 225, that gets into your charter or a charter community. When you go to 2004, you get into additional language in here. Just a moment. There.
Are you commenting specifically on the term city?
Yeah, because, and this is one of the standing issues that I have in here. Some terms are used that there's this understood or common understanding of what it is, but it's not defined.
Would we?
So like the city council is your legislative body. Pursuant to this charter, they are the legislative body. So in 30A, it talks about the decision-making process. It talks about all of the powers of a city, right?
What is the city?
What is the city? So I want to consult with legal about.
Could we replace it with municipality?
No, I would like to see it stay as the city. I'm keeping a list of, I think, definitions, so without having to strike these all over the charter.
So we do have a definition in here, but it just
Okay.
says shall mean the city of Sanford. Do you want to expound upon that?
Right, that it's a municipal corporation, political subdivision of the state.
Could that be,
Pursuant
rather than
to,
do everything,
like,
could that be
Title
just?
38, 2004, you call that reference out, because that's where it says what that it infers that the city, as that entity, has all of those powers.
Could this be fixed by amending the definition?
I think yes.
So leaving
Definition.
language everywhere else, but amending the definition itself.
Must be at the end.
Where are you seeing the definition? Are you referring to
I'm in
101?
section 1413, where the definitions are.
Oh, that's what I was looking for.
And I just kind of highlighted that we want to expound upon that municipal corporation state name, obviously through a drop in the
Yeah.
When we get there, we'll have.
Yeah, and this is why we tie all these together.
So that's like the one big question that will follow throughout the whole charter, that,
That'd be a place to do it.
right? There you go, city, right at the bottom. So we just expound upon that.
Yep,
That should work.
yes, please.
Yep. Seems easy enough. All right, more comments on section 102? Moving to section 103. Any comments on that? I have none.
I have none.
None? Okay. Moving on to Article 2, City Council. Section 201. Again, I had circled 7 members. We did not have any sort of urgency on that, so we can skip that.
6 to 8 is what you'd be looking at, because you still, if we keep the mayor's big change.
Yep.
Okay.
Nothing else on 201? 202?
I'd love to clean up the language. if we're able
Repetitiveness.
to.
Yep.
Yeah.
All the dates.
We can
I'm
we can delete all the references to everything through 2012 through 2015, pretty much, I would think, and reword it.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I'm kind of hoping we can have a question, I don't know how the legal is going to recommend it, but I'd love it to have a question like language cleanups. Like, do you want to clean up language that is no longer necessary, transitional language? I'd love to be able to have that as just one question on the ballot, because it's great to get rid of all the junk.
Right.
So we have to put the question on the ballot to whether we can clean up the language, and then
I
we
don't know
can
if it
clean
can
up
be
the language.
separated. He might say we have to go by article, or I don't know how he's going to say it, so.
Okay. Again, noted. Nothing else, though, in 202? 203, qualifications.
I wish we could have attendance as a qualification.
So I had written down, because it just struck me funny. Not funny, really. Cease to possess any of these qualifications or shall be convicted of a crime punishable by imprisonment for more than 6 months. And it just, I was like,
That's a
what?
Class E crime,
What's that?
Class E.
Okay.
Yeah, D, Class D.
I was just thinking, like, if I'm a counselor and I'm imprisoned for less than 6 months, I can still serve on council?
No.
No.
It has to be so a lot of people get less, but if the crime has a term like 2 to 5 years or 6 months to something, even if you only get 2 months, that crime could have warranted the bigger, that's what it is.
Okay.
So if you go, because a lot of times, it's a crime that would get more than 6 months if it's a Class D. Most of them are rated that way. But we've had one incident of this occurring, and he actually didn't get prison time. They actually gave him some community service, but it was the wisest choice on the judge's side to do that. But the crime itself could have given him that. That's why it was that level.
Okay.
But I stood in the courtroom, and as that individual exited, I handed the individual the papers, got all of their materials and keys and everything later that afternoon, and done.
Okay. The language just struck me funny. It doesn't, obviously, if,
A lot of this language, when I was doing the 2002 charter, because that's where a lot of this comes from, it was coming from other charters.
I figured it must have been such. It
'Cause
seemed
I'm
very
not that
specific.
brilliant at all.
Yeah.
Well, and that'd be my only question, is are we missing anything when you look at other charters that should be there?
Here you are. So, under 203, it explicitly says, shall not hold any other paid office or position of employment with the city or the school department, as far as qualifications for council.
Right.
If you look at state law, it absolutely allows for employees of a school department to run for municipal office. That's by state law. You, as a charter, as a community, can determine otherwise,
Which we did.
which you did. But I just point out, because I did this 20 years ago, And a prominent member of that community said, but what you don't understand, Mr. Buck, is, thank you for doing your research, but what you don't understand is, we as a community have made this choice, therefore, it will stand. Got it. 10 years later, they voted that out, but I just wanted to point out that you can allow that.
So no counselor, including the mayor, shall hold any other paid or office positions of employment with the city or school department. That's the sentence we're referring to.
Right. But
And
that's
by
because-
state law, it is actually allowed.
Rusty.
for the school, somebody employed by the school department can legally run for the elected office as a select person and/or counselor. Because that legislative body may determine the entirety of its budget number, but the school board determines the distribution of that sum of money. Therefore, it's not legally a conflict of interest for that person sitting over there to vote on a school budget that he or she may be affected by.
Thank you for bringing this up. So I didn't even, so if I'm a teacher, I cannot run for city council,
Correct.
Yeah,
Not in
or-
Sanford, no.
not in
Or if
Sanford.
you're employed in any way. So I think once there was someone getting a coach's stipend
Yep,
in any bills
exactly,
that-
yep.
that was disqualified because of that.
Okay. So this is worthy of a conversation.
Yeah, it was a big deal at the time. Yeah.
Well, is it a big deal now? Why is it in place?
Because of the
To prevent
budget process.
conflict?
Because eventually that budget comes back to the city. But
But
as
if
Steve
we-
is saying, it's the entire budget, it's not piecemeal by piece. So,
For the other community I served in, it was more of a relevant issue because it took out a huge pool of potentially qualified,
city councilors.
qualified people for city council. It just struck them out.
Well, I think it does here too. I mean, how many people do we have in our city that are employed by the school department?
Well, there's 825 employees under the school department.
Yeah,
I
but
don't know
there's
how
a
many
lot that
live
live
here
out of
versus,
town.
but,
So it's not, I mean, it's a good discussion because I think at the time it kind of tore us up a bit, having to eliminate this person. It did not get changed in the last charter committee. However, there was a lot of more of this at the time between the school and the city, which probably led to why this is here and why it was felt to be necessary. Because there is a lot more, like, I don't want to become Portland, so I don't know, at what point you want to make sure that those good relations stay in place.
So I used to have a city councilor whose spouse worked for the school department, and he would try to
That's allowed.
resolve himself from voting on the budgets. No, it's not a conflict of interest.
So you start to wonder, say, okay, so say you ended up with, I don't know, 5 out of 7 city councilors who are employed by the school department. How does that impact what the manager has to deal with when dealing with the school department and dealing with all those other, the things that do happen, the things we do have to kind of, hey, you didn't balance your checkbook this week, the city can't finish balancing all the municipal side without the school side, that becomes a topic every once in a while, and I wonder how that helps on the day-to-day management.
And then the other part of that conversation is, so it is a direct conflict if somebody holds some other employed position for the city, because in that circumstance, if you sit at the council, you get to vote directly on that particular aspect of compensation, not just the whole bottom line. So it's rather, for me, it's rather problematic that that's disallowed. Like if you had a part-time summer position and you were a counselor in the rec department here, you couldn't be a city councilor, but if you were doing that same thing in the summer programming for the school department, you could be.
That's a great analogy, because that's kind of what was happening.
Right, because right now,
Stipend.
you just said no on both of those situations, and there it is.
And so on the city side, sorry, go ahead,
Yeah,
Bob.
Mr. Chair, I just wanted to follow up, try to be brief. I'm on my 3rd cup of coffee here, so my mouth is running here a little bit. So, I think that what we need to throw into the discussion here is the appearance of conflict of interest. It may be legal, but I think we want to avoid the appearance of conflict in this situation. And I also want to add, this is very common I believe it's very common to have this separation of school employees and restricting them from running for public office on the municipal side. I just reverse that situation. Should I be able to be on the school board and on the city council at the same time? This makes sense the way that it is, my opinion.
Thank you. Okay, so it's a topic that's noted that we can come back and revisit later. We don't have to make decisions on it right now.
Sue has a comment.
Sue, I'm sorry.
No, I'm sorry. You were discussing briefly the qualifications for counselors, and if they had any of those offenses. That was while they were actively an elected city councilor, their term or their office would become vacant if they were charged with such crime. No expansion on future eligibility. Once you've been convicted of a crime, you've served your 5 years in jail, and
And
6
then you
years
can-
down the road, you're going to run again, and that's okay.
So perhaps there could be language added to say, once you're committed of a crime of over 6, you cannot.
I didn't think so either.
Shaking head, okay. Well, thank you, because it's worth the conversation.
Because-
Cannot limit it.
Once they have served their sentence, you can't hold it over their heads for the rest of their lives.
Yep.
Not fair.
During their active term.
Okay.
Thank you.
We
No,
get that
thank you.
question a lot when
Might as well just have a,
somebody who's a convicted felon, right?
Yep.
Right, when they take papers out, can't exclude them. Not
Okay.
just by charter, but by state law.
and it's not fair. I mean,
Got
once
it.
you've served your
Thank you, Sue.
sentence, you should-
The other thing that I've seen put in here,
Under which section, Steve? I'm sorry.
yeah, under 203, under qualifications is, another community that I worked for put in here that if you weren't current on your taxes, you couldn't run for elected office.
Oh, that's a no-brainer.
Yeah, and I didn't think it was going to stand legal muster. It did, and it's in their charter to this day. You can.
So let's note that.
That's actually has been problematic for us. It's uncomfortable. Not
Yeah,
up to
I bet.
state. Yeah, I'm sure. Current means you don't have any back. So,
All right,
Just city tax, or?
just city tax.
just city tax.
Well, so the current applies to not just only, at the time you're running office, but during the time that you're in office, if you go non-current, you don't meet the qualifications anymore.
Who is really keeping track of what I'm not
I
writing?
am.
You are? Okay.
And I've got
Isn't that my
comments-
job?
I'm
And
typing
Jack's
comments on the
doing
side,
it.
Mark.
Okay, thank you. All
It's not
right,
your job, it's our job.
Okay.
Keep you-
I'm doing it.
thank you.
So we're all keeping notes.
All right, section 204 then, powers and duties. Did I already go there? No. No comment? Okay, section 205, 205 point,
So again, sorry.
Where are
So
we,
the
204?
Yeah, under 204, powers and duties, it says, "The members of the city council shall be and constitute the municipal officers." So there is some ambiguity as far as municipal officers, so I can't remember more if that's in the definitions. I want to go back and look at that.
I assumed you had all looked at them all.
Well, but
No,
so-
it uses city official, not municipal
City official.
officers. Okay.
So we need to define municipal officers. So the city council, legally, they are the legislative body, right? That's what they're elected to. Those 7 members become the legislative body, so they replace the town meeting. So your town meeting used to be a legislative body, now that's the city council. That's the representative form of governance. So I just want to make sure that we get that clear in here. If this should be municipal officers, or this should be the legislative body. That's just defined under 30A, Section 2001, Sub 9.
so in your mind, it could be as simple as, and constitutes the legislative body of the city of Sanford.
I just think this needs to be cleaned up.
Okay,
So I just may have made that reference.
okay. Any more on 204?
That wouldn't be a reference to anything in state law. Would there be a reason why we would use one or the other based on state
Well,
statute?
and with my great admiration and respect to Attorney Dench, who, who reviewed and crafted it, there's some of those ambiguities in here. I don't think, it was just
But we should stick with one.
that I wouldn't pick up, but after living with us for 10 years, I'm hitting on these now, so, right?
And at the end of our process, this is all going to go to a legal review anyway for language and, okay.
It will. And a lot of the, but like, for example, as far as the representatives on this committee, I had to send that out to legal review, who gets into the legislative intent of the charter and such under that, and makes a determination, yep, no, it's fine. But we had to send that out because the charter wasn't clear in its definitions.
Okay. Thank you. Section 205, 205.1. I had highlighted appoint the city manager, the members of the budget committee, planning zone, you know. Is there one thing that we, as I was reviewing this, one consideration of a route we could go is we could have budget committee be elected officials rather than appointed officials? Not saying they necessarily should be.
So we did that last charter, and we were having trouble getting
People to do
run.
it, sure. So, you know, if we were to somehow go that route, then this language would need a change.
Yeah, I like I got to tell you, I like the idea, if we keep the budget committee, of actually lengthening the terms, because I don't like this year-on change. Be nice to have some continuity there.
Good luck getting people for that.
I agree. But yes, elected, we had more problems electing people.
Yeah.
We got exactly 4 applications this year for 4 positions on the budget committee, so it's tough.
Well,
And the
it's
same is true of zoning.
perha- Sure. I wanted to at least note that the option existed, and if we were to look at, say, you know, as we get into the budget process, if we were to look at that budget process and say, wow, this really would be served well by people that were year-round or however this were, and then that could turn back into the conversation of, should this be an elected position or not? So I just wanted to keep it for conversation.
When you do that, so think of it this way, you know, when you do that, you're essentially, if you're electing them full on, you're setting up also, even though they have no final authority on the budget, but you're kind of setting up this, then this is what happened. You set up this competing situation between 2 elected bodies. And in the end, I think the people on the finance committee realized they really had no authority to finalize that budget. And it's like, why am I spending all this time? Because the city council can do stuff, and, you know, I'd almost rather see us go from 7 to 9 on the city council and give full authority of the budget into the
Subcommittee.
city council, and have subcommittees that exist that have city councilors and school committee members, then try to add a competing body, I guess.
So that's, you know, now so we identified like a branch and now another potential branch of that branch, you know.
But I mean, at some point, we have to realize it becomes a bigger issue, and it would require a charter commission, not just a committee.
Yep. All right, any other language on 205.1? 205.2? Seeing none. 205.3? Oh, yeah, sorry. Nope, that was good, sorry. 205.3? Trying to look back through my notes.
Still back on 205.2, where it says, talking about removing for cause after 6-month probationary period and such under that. They have the budget committee in there. I mean, they're appointed for a 1-month period, so
Yeah.
I just want to keep that in mind, depending on how you,
Depending on how that conversation turns out.
you know.
I suppose we should flag it in case we change that.
And then this also has come up under 205.2, that last part of the sentence that says, and members of all other city boards, commissions, and committees appointed by the council. So under the Rules of Procedure for the City Council, Section 41, they went into further clarification in there as far as appointments, when it's appointed by the mayor, when it's appointed by the full, subject to the review and approval of the council and such under that. So I think we should look at the charter here and Section 41 of the Rules of Procedure and see what, if anything, needs to mesh there.
But you actually say appointed by the council or mayor almost has to be added at the end of this. Yeah.
Because we've run into points of non-clarity there.
Well, the mayor is a member of the council, though, so isn't that redundant?
True, but a committee, there are some committees appointed by just the mayor. That person will notify us of who the members are, but we don't have to take a separate vote. So you want the council to be able to remove people from that. I mean, usually the mayor can directly, but it's not in here anywhere. So you want kind of some.
Clarifying language.
Clarifying to make sure that these include the committees appointed by just the mayor.
So currently,
These are smaller committees.
currently, the legal distinction is for anything that's called out in the charter, then that goes for the council, the full council to approve. You know, the mayor may be driving that appointment, but the full council goes to the approval. If it's not something that's subject to the charter, you know, the council can establish task force and other committees on an as-need basis and such under that, then it's over to the rules of procedure. So the training that I have and the legal understanding that I have is for anything that the charter is silent on, the city council can establish their rules of procedure and determine how they will govern the city, you know, govern their conduct for anything that's not explicit in the charter.
And so we're, speaking as a somebody who doesn't know a lot about this, so adding language here would make that, what you're trying to do is limit the things that city council has complete discretion over?
No, I'm not making
by
any
clarifying it
suggestion
here?
to limit the council. It's clarity. It's right. That's the only place we've run into issues, you know, in the past.
Ambiguity.
Is the lack of clarity as to, well, what's called out in here and what is not. What constitutes a board or a commission that's in the charter versus not.
Yep. The clearer you can make it, the less potential for conflict later.
Right. So,
Yeah, but then at the same time, if you put too much here, you can end up with all sorts of conflict just trying to interpret, because we've had people pull language from random sections of the charter completely out of context and try to have it be a controlling mechanism on something else. And it's, you know, you have to be careful with the charter because, you know, you can fix that. It's, you know, obvious that they've pulled it out of somewhere that it doesn't apply and they misinterpreted the charter, but you don't want to create a situation where you have too many areas for misinterpretation. The simpler, the clearer. I mean, trust me, there was a point at which, you know, when we wrote the 2002 charter, we had a huge conversation about conflicts of interest, and you get into all these conversations, well, how do you tie them down to prevent that? And we realized the simpler the better. Just use the state law for conflicts of interest, and then you have to trust that the process and the people become better and change it that way, and that's what happens,
So, yeah, I'm not suggesting any change of authority or such under that. I think it's just the clarity in when you say members of all city boards, commissions, and committees. Perhaps that needs to be in our definitions. Boards, commissions.
What are boards, what are commissions, what are committees?
Right. Because, you know, so you can go to this section and you know what has to happen as far as the city manager, the budget committee, the planning board, and the board of assessment review, zoning board of appeals, and the housing authority. Well defined. And then the ambiguous part gets into the boards, commissions, and committees. Well, what are those?
Okay. Understood.
But you also, I think it was Morris said that might be good to add "or the mayor" on the other side of council in 205.2. Because some are appointed by.
You can or cannot, but essentially what happens is the city council has given authority to the mayor through the rules of procedure. Does the charter need to do that? Because through the rules of procedure, the city council can also pull that authority away, which is sometimes not a bad thing. You know, if you get a mayor that's, you know, a one person, the charter is not a strong mayor. You get someone in there who tries to take authority, you know, you want the city council to have some ability to pull it back, to make sure don't have a dictator.
That would give that, so I think that'd be good.
Yeah, so it'd be interesting to see if it would be positive or negative.
Okay, thank you.
We haven't had a dictator yet. I don't know if Steve will disagree.
What have
with
we've had three
No,
total?
I just would like
Had
to
to
be
think
it.
about
I'd
that
just like to
answer,
be it, you know.
Section 205.3. So, same issue here, Steve?
As far as.
Create, change, abolish offices, departments, agencies, committees. other than offices, department? Do we need a definition on all those things?
Well,
Yeah.
again, it's established by the charter. So, like, like the communication, right, but like, for example, the communications coordinator, the council had to approve that job description because they're creating the position for the first time, right? So they had to approve that. If you're creating a new department, like if you're creating a communications department, they would have, right, so the position falls under administration, so it's no new department. So the council calls that out, the council establishes those. So I haven't had the issues here. It's
Okay.
always in the appointments, and I think we can get to in the definitions.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's only certain positions that have to actually get final approval, like if he chooses a fire chief or a police chief, one of the major, more politically centered figures, that's an approval by the council after the city manager has chosen them, so. That works well so far.
Okay. Sue?
I was just going to point out that the last sentence in that section, referring to Department of Education, the other paper that I had emailed Larissa this morning, the general code analysis,
Yep.
references that.
Department of Education and School
Department of
Department are both
Education
used
and
in the charter. Are these different departments, or should one of these titles be changed?
And I don't know if that's something you want to wait and discuss when you have Superintendent Nelson join in on the conversations.
Use one or the other, but we just need to be using one.
There
I
is
think the-
something in there that says when it speaks of the school committee, that it means the Department of Education. I think it's further in. I remember reading it. I don't remember where, unfortunately.
Probably section 5.
Okay.
Okay.
So the school committee is the Department of Education?
The Department of Education shall be governed and administered by a Board of Education, hereafter referred to as the school committee. Yep.
Board of Education.
It uses Department of Education under Board of Education section.
So you're,
Because
Actually
it's
had
the
a question
department,
on
and it has, the Department of Education is the entirety of the school department, and the Board of Education is the school committee, they would be the ones running it, so.
And if you go to the website,
clear.
it is the Sanford School Department, not Sanford Board of Education. Just saying.
So for clarification purposes, we could have language that is consistent, I guess, is what you're saying, Sue.
Yeah, I had the same question later on, because it seems odd to say when we say this, we mean this.
Yeah, actually,
Just
when
say
when I read Department of Education, I was thinking the State Department of Education. It wasn't even.
I thought of that.
Yeah, I think a determination on what the school side is important. I mean, it's kind of historic. I remember a superintendent telling me, it's all over the place. Are you a committee? Are you a board? Are you this? Are you that? We tried to then, without any language, just refer to ourselves as a school board. So I do think there needs to be some clarification, and that may need to come from the school. I'll call them the school committee. What do they want to call themselves? And then we can work that language
Well,
into
The
the
school
charter.
department, just so everybody knows, in 2002, when we were doing the charter, we gave it to the school department. They actually did a lot of the language adjustments in that school section. That school section didn't change that much with the following charter commission. So I would say that what they put as the language in section 5, right, is kind of what we should try to follow as we fix language clarity throughout the charter.
Well, couldn't we, there's the State Department of Education, there's the Sanford School Department, and there's the school committee, right? We could keep the language so that it's whoever we're referring to in those things are only referred to by one of those three names.
Right.
Or I think there's three things there. I think you just go to your definitions and you.
Well, that's
define
what I'm saying. So if it's I haven't looked at the definitions, if it's all defined, but
They chose, when they made their adjustments to our work, they chose Department of Education and Board of Education, but they allow Board of Education to also be referred to in the Charter of School Committee. That's kind of what happened in 2002.
we don't have to leave it that way.
Well, the problem is their legal review from their attorney, because they're going to.
That's what created that.
That's what created that. So if that legal review that occurred back then did the Board of Education and the Department of Education, if whatever we do, if we try to change it back, they're probably going to say, no. We want it, that's what I'm afraid of, is that we're going to go back to something they didn't like, and then they're going to say, no, we don't want you to do that. So
I
we
still
can
think-
ask Matt, but Matt's going to want to refer to the
I still
attorney.
think we can clarify it in definitions and fix it there. So my training is.
But in those definitions, then I don't think we should, I don't know. There might be words in here that are loosely used that maybe aren't covered exactly in the definitions. So what is it? I'm sorry, Steve, because I totally cut you off. The Department of Education. Is the Department of Education actually in the definitions as department?
No, that's what we're talking about adding.
Right.
The Department of Education means
So if we
the school
define it.
department, right?
And even if you had Board of Education and School Committee mean the same thing, you could define it that way.
Okay.
That way, we're not striking through the whole.
Right.
So we could say any references to Board of Education, Department of Education, et cetera,
Right.
mean this.
Yeah, and vice versa.
Yeah, and it isn't defined now.
Not defined in here. So, so my training is, so the municipal charter, we're talking about the legislative bodies, you've created a city council pursuant to Home Rule Authority and Title 30A. The school department, right, it's a school administrative unit. That is a subdivision of the state of Maine, a political subdivision of the state of Maine, not dissimilar from the city is a political subdivision. That's that separation of power, right, that's there. So I've been Brian Dench, right, really drilled down on me, Steve, they're a political subdivision of the state. Once you hand them their budget, you are done.
I actually think it's
Because
great that
they're
the
answerable
city,
to the state at that point.
our city charter actually calls it out right in the beginning, too.
Yeah,
So that's a good thing.
yeah, so you're recognizing that in your charter. So, we're 30A and they're 20A. There it is.
Okay.
I think that's what's probably made it easier for us, because we called it out and we recognize it.
Right, yes. Some cities haven't, so.
Yes,
All right.
I was thinking of Portland as I said it.
You want to say it? Yeah, thank you.
Time check, we have 45 minutes, many pages. 205.4, this one's
We're
easy.
finishing definitions as we go.
All right. 205.4, make, alter, or repeal ordinances, conversation. 205.5, 205.5, did I have some? Must
That's a
make.
good one, because the city manager can actually point to that and say, hey, we're getting off track. Why don't we have a meeting to do this? Because
Develop a set of priorities and objectives for the city for the ensuing fiscal year. Now, I had actually flagged that as well, because when I go onto the website, I can see council goals, and they're from like 2017.
yes, because, yes, the current mayor is working on making sure it gets done.
Okay, I'm just saying, well, that's to your point of must or how,
We had done some just before COVID hit, but I don't think it ever made it to final. I don't know the city manager, I'm looking at him. But,
Which
yes,
section
it
you
wasn't,
sorry, 205.5. It's a seemingly short and otherwise, develop a set of priorities and objectives for the city for the ensuing fiscal year.
yeah, and I think that's a good thing to have there, and I agree with you, but that is more leadership than anything,
Okay.
okay?
So it's in your
I'm
mind,
trying to be sensitive to this.
no, it's okay. In your mind, it does not need further clarification of the charter. I wrote the word must or is required to or.
It should be done regularly, and if you're keeping up on them, it's not an onerous process. It's when you fall behind on doing it, that all of a sudden you realize that 5 years ago, things have completely changed, and you've got to really reestablish it instead of a constantly morphing document. I think Steve would agree. So we're working on a current, major upgrade to that, and hopefully we'll establish more of a routine to do it annually, like we used to. We did
Okay.
do that quite a bit.
So now they have the power to do it, and you're saying.
So I'm asking the
maybe it should
committee
be more
whether
strongly
they should be
encouraged.
required to do it, whether do we need language in here that says it has to be done?
I firmly believe it has to be done, because if you don't do it, then all of a sudden, every single counselor is throwing stuff at the city manager. And the city manager, the great thing about that document, they can look at it and say, look, you're way outside the
This
priorities.
isn't what you said you wanted to do, yeah.
Yep. And so then it becomes, I'm not just going to do this. We have to decide if we're going to reestablish and drop some things and add this instead. Wouldn't you say, Steve? You've actually said that before.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm basically repeating what you've said.
It's just a mishmash.
It would help some of the
Wait a minute,
haphazardness.
This doesn't fit into anything here, but you're directing staff to expend significant amounts of time, and it doesn't pertain to.
You've spent the last, I don't know if it's budget committee or city council meeting, you've made references to, well, no, I can't do that because this goes, or I can, but this goes completely against what the city council has directed me to do or something. So, you know, it would give clarification there.
It's really important for a city manager to be able to point to this as, let's do this so that you're not throwing me like all over the place.
So again, 205.5, we could come back and revisit that and add clarifying language there to say it's a requirement or however you want to do that. 205.6, perform an annual performance review of the city manager. Any language there? 205.7, annual audit. 205.8,
Put Department of Education, just so we can clarify there.
school department, school committee, again, language.
Exactly.
Okay,
School committee is defined in section 5, kind of.
Okay, school department,
As being the
though.
same as Board of Education.
205.9,
I just had a question. Did it need to specify the type of disaster, human, natural, industrial, economic?
so this is 205.9. Adopt, modify, carry out plans, improvement and redevelopment of neighborhoods for the replanning, reconstruction, and redevelopment of any area or district which may have been destroyed in whole or in part by disaster.
I didn't know if it needed to be defined on what type, because there are so many types of disaster.
What is
or it could be a
disaster?
combined disaster.
I don't even remember this section.
We need to have a disaster definition in the back.
It even can be combined disaster.
Yep.
Do we need to have this language at all, would be another question.
Or
'Cause I don't
strike it.
I don't remember it either, but
Adopt, modify, carry out plans proposed by the planning board for the replanning, improvement, or redevelopment of neighborhoods and for the replanning, reconstruction, redevelopment of any area. So, a fire.
Well, so I had in my notes, because I was going to ask this from the historical perspective, what was the intent of this 205.9? Because I really didn't pick that up in the minutes, reading through the commission. I didn't understand this particular piece. The way I interpret this is, so I know that the city councilors appoint the 7 members to the planning board. And we used to have alternates and such. Now we have 7 fully appointed and 7 voting members of the planning board. That's a delegation of authority. The planning board has under state law as well as charter, they have a distinct purpose for land use review, subdivision review, zoning and such under that. And in many instances, they're making recommendations to the city council for particular ordinances or changes to the land use tables and such under that. So the intent of this, yeah. But a lot of times, the city council's driving it the other way. The council's pushing where
To
it
the
is the
planning board.
planning board's going, which is certainly allowed, right? So I put them, what was the intent of this particular piece? I didn't,
Would it have to do with the fires they had back in the 50s?
That's the first thing that comes to mind is what if downtown was leveled by a fire?
Right, and there could be so many variables that.
And yours was, how do you define disaster?
How do you define disaster? Human,
Buildings
natural,
in the downtown.
economic, combined, industrial disaster, which people have had.
Is disaster the right word?
I know.
That
'cause
was
that's
what
like
the
a big,
original
wide
question was.
open Thing there.
COVID? Yeah, how do you want to, I mean, depending on who wanted to interpret this.
Right.
Well, I can tell you one disaster that happened in the 60s and 70s, and that's urban renewal.
Yes,
I was thinking that.
absolutely.
So define your definition of
Yeah.
disaster.
Well, imagine if the mill
Most of ours.
fire had spread into Gowen Street and Davis and,
Well,
Spruce. That would have been a disaster.
That's what I have a feeling that this was intended to,
But it doesn't define it,
Right.
like we said.
You could take out by disaster, and it would really say the same thing. Because you're right, disaster, is it a declared disaster, declared by
Yeah,
the state?
right? Is it, I mean, we getting,
That may-
federal help for the disaster? Or, I mean, it could be,
redevelopment of any area or district which may have been destroyed, period.
What would the planning board do, though?
Destroyed in whole or in part, you could leave that in, just leave out by disaster.
Well, I would assume that at that point, you're looking at how you're basically looking at what you would normally do in your process, which is, okay, someone wants to put in a subdivision, do we like it or we don't like it? Someone's gonna come forward with a concept,
We may
And
have
you
to
guys
ch-
are gonna be part of the process
We
of the
may have to
concept.
change the zoning or something for that,
Right.
Well-
for that area.
What if you just said adopt, modify, and carry out plans proposed by the planning board? Period.
You could end it.
Sure.
You could end it district.
Hold on just a second, Diane. I see you. Oh, Diane, go ahead.
Takes her a second sometimes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If you take the, that part of the section and you take it at face value, I would think something like the stack coming down. I would think about Stenton Trust fire. I would think about the collapse of the old mill building on Jagger Mill. That's if you take it at face value. And that's my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Diane.
You could, look at this, look at it and end it at district.
Replanning, reconstruction, or redevelopment of any area or district.
Who cares about the disaster part?
Well, then you could get into, depending on how you wanted to read it, then does council have power to replan, reconstruct, and redevelop any area or district, period?
Yes, we do that now.
Well,
I
the
mean,
cap-
look at the Mill District. The Mill District is no longer mills. They're struggling to redevelop that. That's a wonderful example, I think.
I mean, I think the council would direct the planning board to,
Well, that's what
Start-
Steve
get
was saying,
started
is
on
it
it,
it
yeah.
often goes the other way.
We do get them to get started and then they do work.
you
and then we-
guys would call it a disaster area and ask us to
D-
come up with some ideas to fix it.
Yeah,
Have to
it is a
declare it
weirdly
as such.
worded
Have to
thing.
declare it as such by the city council. You could add that.
So perhaps this is in direct correlation. So the, anything pursuant to Chapter 280, right? Under Chapter 280, the way your ordinance is set up now, the city council can't make amendments to Chapter 280 until such time as the planning board has made a recommendation. Regardless of what that recommendation is, the council still can do what the council is going to do, but you can't do that until they've reviewed it, gone through a public hearing process and such, reviewed it, and make a recommendation back to you. So that's under 280, so that encompasses your zoning, your land use tables, and such into that, which really gets into the heart of this.
Does the
And at
plan,
the end of the process, the only time the modification can happen is the council has to authorize, has to go through an active ordinance to change that.
so does the planning board ever initiate anything on their own?
Yes, yes.
You do.
Okay.
The other thing I think about this, when I'm thinking about the disaster or the redevelopment of neighborhoods and such into that, is we now have a land bank authority. So we've established, the city council established a land bank authority that has worked on the dangerous and hazardous structures in cooperation with the planning board, and they're just now getting to that aspect of, I'm gonna make a recommendation here in the near future that you establish a housing trust, because you've taken ARPA funds to start back towards that neighborhood piece. It's just a good mechanism to have in there, but we're getting back to the redevelopment side, so I can think of like Island Avenue has, I forgot how many lots they have right in a row now that have been lost, that that's a game changer when that goes back for redevelopment now.
We've actually looked at those ARPA funds and where could we start this process? And Island Avenue, where there's a whole line where you could establish a block of new style housing and really kind of set a tone for what you'd like to see happen down there. We see it in our eyesight. We can see what we would like, but that's a good process because the planning board being involved in, or I would consider a disaster that having that fire, having to tear down as many properties as we've had in that neighborhood, that it's a changing neighborhood and we could change it for the better. So I don't know if this is necessary for that though. I don't know, it's kind of like
I just asked about the intent, because to me, there's nothing that's broke here. I just didn't know what the intent was.
Well, and Kim was just looking for clarification on, do we need
Disaster.
to
I mean,
define
'cause
what kind of
So many
disaster?
types of disaster, right? So that's when I read it, that's when
So-
what kind of disaster? Does
I
that-
saw Maura's already circled it, so it's something that we can come back to.
I really like her suggestion to put a period after district and get rid of the rest of it. I think
That would work.
that might get you where you need to go.
All right,
Yeah.
so
I
that's,
think you could strike out the whole disaster part, but add in there pursuant to the comprehensive plan, right? Because that's,
Yes.
they are the keepers of the comprehensive plan.
all right. Very good, thank you. All right, 205.10. referring to multiple things here, okay.
Oh, yeah, okay, so I just, yes. So the last part of, the last sentence in there, it says, for the purposes, the council may enact an ordinance providing for the compulsory attendance of witnesses, okay. So that's the appropriate use in here, but it's the first time that I pick up on ordinance. I just want to get in our definition 3 things: order, resolution, and an ordinance.
Okay. So we need to add those to the definitions because they're not there. Okay.
Because the clarity is not there.
Did you get those? Order, resolution,
He said it to me a
Ordinance.
million times so far.
order,
so-
resolution, ordinance?
Resolution, and order.
Okay.
Ordinance,
Got it.
resolution.
Order and resolution, right.
All right, 205.11. Two oh five point 12. I had that highlighted only to discuss whether 10 years is the appropriate time. We don't even need to discuss it?
Yeah, and this isn't what created us, right?
Yep.
Okay.
It's not a bad idea to look at it every 10 years. Charter,
Yeah,
I
it
mean,
was-
Portland's down to 5 years.
Well, that was my,
That was my only thing, is that the time, does everyone feel like the time frame is
205.12, this
good?
is what created you.
I thought we were at 219. At least once every 10 years, the city council shall appoint a committee to review provisions of this charter, make recommendations to the city council for any amendments deemed necessary or appropriate. Section 219.
where are you?
Oh, no, 205.12.
205.12 is where I am, sorry.
Right. That's the ordinances.
The intervals are not more than
That's
10
city
years,
code.
proposed revisions or
Yeah, that's not what
recodifications.
we're doing here.
That's not the charter, that's our city
Yeah.
code.
Oh, am I in the wrong place?
Yeah, 205.12 is proposed revisions or recodification of the bylaws and ordinance of the city. Should be
Right.
presented to the city council for reenactment.
Oh,
So
God, we do that constantly.
You're doing that constantly.
That's
Okay,
not us.
okay, so
Okay.
that doesn't apply, okay.
All right.
Sorry, I thought it was the charter committee.
Moving on, 206.1. Compensation for city councilors. 206.2. 207. 208.
Again, 208, you get into qualifications, and we've started to
Qualifications.
discuss that, right?
Yep.
209. 210. 211. Really liking this pace, everybody.
This is what he thought he'd had it all day.
212.1. 212.2.
I just didn't know if it mattered if there was a timeline between the failure to maintain and removal of office.
This is 212.2.
12.2.
A councilor shall forfeit his or her office if he or she fails at any time during the term of office to maintain any qualifications for the office.
Is there like a time limit that they would be removed?
Do you like, I would think if they moved out of town,
No, I meant like the time between failure to maintain and the removal of their office.
So what are the qualifications? So it would, what does it mean
Voter
to
and
maintain qualifications? What are the qualifications? We've already,
city in
that
the
right?
city of Sanford, I mean, a citizen in the city
You
of
have to live here.
Sanford. You have to live here, you have to be a voter here, you have to pay, well, we haven't added the pay your taxes
You
yet.
remember it though?
And you have to not be currently, well, you don't get convicted of a crime during.
for 6 months,
So
whatever.
it was immediate with Steve, so he,
Usually it's residency. So I've had a councilor
The
move
answer is
before, came to a council meeting, said, oh, I just voted in such a said town. Well, wait a minute, you just moved your voter registration. Yeah. Oh.
All right, so
Remove
to
that
Kim's
night.
point, though, you could add the word immediately.
That's what I was
A
just
councilor
wondering, if
shall
it was a
immediately forfeit
timeline.
his or her office.
Yep.
All right,
And the next section up has some time limits in it.
212.3.
No, 2.21. This council can demand in writing that somebody qualify for office. I don't know how you do that. You think they moved? they have to prove they didn't move within 10 days. I'm not sure how that works exactly.
Hold on for a second. So once again, I'm not consistent with where you are, and I don't know if I'm working from a
Well,
document.
the question was, is there a time limit? And I'm saying if you look at the previous section, there is a time in there, 10 days.
You're on 212.3?
Nope. 1.
212.1, okay, sorry.
Yeah.
So Counselor should be able to-
I think that implies it's immediate.
Oh, I see. So you're saying we wouldn't have to add the immediate to 212.2 because it's already defined in
That
the
implies
first section?
that.
or
Okay.
implied.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
212.3?
How do you do physical or mental disability resulting in disability?
How do you define that?
I think when you see it, you'll know, sort of a thing. I don't know.
You guys see it.
It could be a long time.
A current situation.
Yeah.
That's what I was just wondering in that section. How long could that go on?
Yeah, and how do you, like, that one's interesting because
So
it just happened at the one.
You're on two,
so if this was a
It's
council member, this
gotten
would-
better, actually, but it's hard because you're talking about an elected official, so. I spoke with Sue about it, it's hard.
Yeah, who would-
When
who-
somebody's elected, they're elected.
who would define by permanent physical or mental disability resulting in decreased ability to perform
So
as determined by the city council?
I would think if there's a determination through the process that the medical community uses to determine whether you qualify, say, to be in the memory care unit of Summer Commons. If you're qualifying to be in the memory care unit of Summer Commons, it would be hard for you to do your job as a city councilor. Right? We all agree that Alzheimer's and dementia would make for a difficult situation. So
Right,
that
I-
process of approving someone into that situation is the only thing I can think that would prevent someone from doing their duties. Physical ailment shouldn't be an issue, typically.
I think you have to consider incapacitation. I think that's the word. If someone becomes incapacitated, then I think the council should be able to take some action in terms of their membership.
Well, then,
Similar to what Maura is saying.
but then the part of as determined by city council, you know, I don't know, in today's political climate, you can see situations where a majority of council members get together and decide that somebody must be incapacitated because they disagree with them.
Happens all the time, right?
The third-party aspect, but I actually don't think we should define it, because I think that's a slippery slope. I think you have to allow, if there's gonna be a process, it's gonna end up being a legal process, no matter what your charter says.
It's very hard when you have an elected official.
I agree.
Because if you try to define it as incapacitation as determined by a doctor, then
Right, and more your point, like if somebody was committed to Summer Commons and Alzheimer, but somebody also can put or go to the behavioral health unit for a month and then be deemed okay.
Right, well, I wouldn't use the behavioral health.
Right, no, but I'm
I
just
agree.
saying
That's
how
why I'm
it's
kinda
kind of like
I don't-
all over the place.
I don't think we should define it. I think we should just leave it in the air, and if it happens and it's extreme enough,
then you have to deal with it.
I think the city council, through using their attorney, can probably manage it.
Probably,
So,
yeah, I would
there's
agree.
very few cases that are extreme, and I don't think we've ever seen one. I think you're the closest I've ever seen.
Yeah, and
But
that's
even
not
then, there's a
somebody who's-
respect going on that I think most people would want to adhere to as well.
Yeah.
So,
And I'd want to get legal advice on any,
Right. of
well,
course.
I think you might see a move
Yep.
out of the town, which will cause it.
what's that?
You might see a move out of the town based on where they're looking,
Oh, really?
yes.
Okay,
I didn't even know it had gotten that far.
we're going to move forward.
I'm out of the loop. Isn't that crazy?
It's sad, it's heartbreaking.
All right. So right now, we're saying we're just going to leave that language alone.
Yes, I would leave it. That's like a hot, cold. Because I think you need to be able to remove someone if it's that severe and you have to use a process to do it.
If somebody is admitted to a medical facility, then they're not able to,
They can now with Zoom. You have to think of these things. You have to think of these things. And if they're forgetting from one meeting to another what you're discussing, that's not a good thing.
For me sitting here.
Yeah, that's a hard one.
We're going to legal opinion on this one, just like this.
Directly.
Like that, I would think so.
Yeah, so we just leave it and it just goes to the lawyers later.
Anytime, it's gonna end up with the lawyers in any situation. In the however many years I've been doing this, we've never encountered it. So,
But perhaps the way to go would be to ask for a legal opinion if there's anything that should be added to give the ability to deal with a situation.
To
like
give clarification to, yep,
Right.
I'd leave that one alone.
all right. 212.2. I think we already covered that one. I don't think
Yep.
we, do we? Because to Paul's point, 212.1 deals with it already.
Right.
We probably don't have to change
No,
it.
that's a failure to qualify for the office within 10 days. Not a loss of qualifications.
Okay,
So
After a written demand by the council, so the council can give a written demand for a counselor to prove their qualification.
Say they're living in Florida for 6 months and a day, and the city council say, you need to prove that you're living in Maine for 6 months. You know, you can't have both situations.
okay, so you would support the adding the immediately.
You can live in Florida for 9 months a year and still be a legal resident of the state of Maine and a registered voter.
Yeah, see, that's where the Zoom thing is gonna be our problem. I don't think we're gonna be able to consistently allow for Zoom. I think you're gonna have to be showing up at meetings, because that can't happen.
Well,
Isn't there some pending language? I turn to Steve. Isn't there some pending language surrounding Zoom meetings and attendance, or some thought, at least in that area, from the legislature?
Can I, because that's going to get us off topic. Can I, that's noted.
That's fine.
but
That's
do we
fine.
really want to have that conversation
Sure.
right now?
No, not really.
Okay.
Okay.
Sorry,
That's
Bob.
fine. That's all right. No problem.
Bob is right, that's in the current state law that the state legislature passed, allowing the Zoom format and stuff. It's not to preclude residency, right?
Okay. All right, 212.3.
Yes. So right now it says, if a seat of the city council becomes vacant, the city council may appoint an interim.
Will?
Well, so there's the conversation of may, will, must, and if it's a must, timeframes to do so centered around June and November elections, if it's within so many days, time to take papers out, this, that, or the other.
Council can declare a shortened nomination for
Uh,
circumstances under Title 38.
Okay, so for now, without determining what the time frame is and all that, is that something we can just, again, note and
No, I think
come
it's
back to?
I think this is a good one for discussion.
Yeah.
Because we don't face it very often, but we are currently facing it now. And the city council can choose not to put anybody in and just wait for the November election. They could put someone in if they wanted to.
Okay.
Yeah, and to follow on Maura's comment, in my recollection of why this is here is to let the council determine how to proceed when there's a vacancy on the council.
I don't think this would
Leave it-
say, I don't think this would tell them how to proceed. It'd
Well-
probably just push them that they have to
That
do
they have to
something.
do something.
Right.
Right,
Right now,
right. But
we're-
also
right
the
now-
procedure for filling the vacancy is left up to council, as we're doing right now. Council hasn't taken a vote, but the mayor stepped up and said, we're going to wait for the election to fill Councilor Tuttle's position, and that's what
No, we're
was
actually
decided
discussing
in
that as
this
a-
instance.
She doesn't have that authority. We're actually discussing that as a full city council. Currently, we're in a pause because he just passed away and respectful to the family phase. part of it.
But still, the council is determining the procedure, and I think that's the intent of the language in this section.
I think the question is, should we allow them to not fill it for a lengthy period of time, or do they have to fill it? And I think that's the question he's asking by changing may to will. Should
It's-
we do may to will?
Yeah, it's just a clear, do we want that council to still have that authority to either make a decision or not make a decision, or do we sort of want to force the fact that there is a decision made, right? By adjustments here. We can come back to that. Steve, point of clarification, we got 18 minutes left. As we're making changes in each one of these sections, so if we make a change in section 2.122 that says immediately, is the way that that's going to go to ballot for the referendum, like, is it going to be are there going to be, I think you made reference last meeting that there's that potentially like 30 separate, like somebody's going to have to vote on that particular thing and be like, yes or no?
So we might want to be careful which one.
How many, you know, if they're, yeah, which ones are really important and which ones not, because if they've got 75 things to vote on, then it's going to be very difficult.
Which is a great reason to put as much as we can into definitions, because then you can just do the whole
Because
definition
that's
section.
definition part is there, that's not getting voted. Our definitions would get voted on as just definitions.
As one
Right.
section.
Okay.
Right.
Thank you, that helps me.
Great.
Section 213, rules of procedure. Oh, hold on, let me go back. Easy one, this is from the information that I got earlier, or that we all got, I think, section 212.2 going back. There was the opinion from the general code on section 2.2 that just said the wording qualifications for the offices apparently should read qualifications for the office. Okay. Sorry, section 214, public hearing. It's a long one. I don't know if everybody's already, go ahead, Jack.
Don't most ordinances have to have 2 readings?
They do now, yes.
I don't think I saw that in there, but
Is it a state law for two?
No, it's in your
Was there an amendment?
charter, or is it in the ordinance? It's in the charter. There's 14-day separation between first and second reading.
So you're saying his concern is addressed later in the charter?
Right, so the act of ordinance is in here, as well as the emergency act. The act of emergency ordinance is defined in here.
214's been amended. I don't know if that's the new one or not.
Yeah, we amended it to 10 days. That 10 days used to be 14 days. So that allows us to publish something right after our prior meeting and be able to have it at our next meeting, so. But it doesn't say 2 readings of the ordinance.
Which is what
Which is
Jack's
what Jack
point
is saying.
was, yep.
Yeah. Well, but I think that's later in the charter.
Okay.
Can you write down 2 readings on there?
Yep,
Just
and look for it.
make
Yep.
sure we come back to it.
Got it.
Thank you. 214.1. I don't mean to rush anybody here. I don't know how much you've already reviewed.
Yeah, this doesn't, we don't seem to have a problem with emergency ordinances, Steve.
Nope.
No.
Okay, so yeah, I would look to you to
I think we've
say,
done
do you
more of
have
them in the
issues
past
in
2
this
years
area?
than ever.
Okay.
So, yep.
215.
Yeah. Your job, Sue, it's your job.
Should we have a lengthy discussion on this item? Just kidding. 216.
That's good.
217. Nope, 216. Back to 216. Oh, section 216 refers to the State Department of Audit. Should this reference be updated to the Office of the State Auditor?
Okay, I got it. Office of the State Auditor.
Okay, the next time I have to refer to that document isn't until section 403, so I'm good.
All right.
Thank you, Sue. Section, I said 216.
Also in 216 is, it says report to the council, the city manager, and it says superintending school committee. It should be superintendent.
Superintendent
What's that?
of the,
School. Yep.
Just superintendent.
the school superintendent?
The superintendent and school committee is what it should say.
Superintendent and school, yeah.
Yeah, they're just going to see.
Okay, got it.
All right. 217, appointment of city manager. 218. 219. Here's at least once every 10 years.
Yep,
Everybody's comfortable with that?
yep.
301.
It's just the cleanup language. You had the going into the process of having the elected mayor and such, so
I had issue, or not an issue, I just wanted to throw out to the committee, I sort of understand term limits and so forth, but the council can serve indefinitely, right? School committee can serve indefinitely, but the mayor can only serve 3 consecutive 2-year terms.
So we actually had that in our prior charter when it was the appointment of a chair of the city council. So we actually had, the chair of the city council had term limits. So we did the same thing, because I don't like term limits, but when leadership, it's not necessarily a bad idea.
I support that.
Okay.
So
To me,
can
it
the
just
mayor-
struck me a little strange.
Can the mayor then in turn run just for the general council?
City council, yeah. That person can run.
And
for
then,
city council.
and then
Yep.
go, and then they could go back to being mayor however many years later.
Yep, exactly. And, yeah, so it doesn't term them out forever. It just kind of throws a break in. Because and a lot of us believe that the problems aren't necessarily with the term limits, it's with the leadership that never changes, and that's where you tend to get into some issues. So you have the same section on the school committee. They can only serve as the chair of the school committee for a certain length of time. I think the planning board has the same thing. So we only did it, throughout the charter, we did it in leadership positions only.
The difference to me, though, on that, on the school committee, though, is that nobody's voting on the chairperson of the school committee, and people do vote for mayor.
This is 100% an opinion.
Yeah,
'Cause
and
I
me
feel
too. It's-
directly opposite
and
from what you do.
Well, I'm not saying I feel anything. I'm just saying, did we want to have the conversation? It struck me that the mayor position was singled out. I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, it was singled out specifically, though.
Okay.
So, I mean, if anybody has a different opinion, we can
Yeah,
discuss it.
I'm asking if anybody feels strongly about this.
So
8 years is enough.
I was
Okay.
taking notes.
It's
What-
probably enough for the
get-
mayor, too.
If you get a.
That's
yeah,
what I'm saying.
No,
That's
it's,
what I'm
I don't
saying.
think, I don't think he's attacking any particular person, but I'm saying that if there were certain chairs we've had, 8 years was enough. Like, and I'm thinking my full time on the council from 2002, 2004, there were times where, you were in the minority and you're constantly having these problems, and it's the person, and it's just, yeah, it's not
Okay.
necessarily a bad thing.
Yeah, I had a quick conversation with Tom, who's the only mayor who's been term limited at this point.
Yeah, exactly.
And I really do, I'm sure Tom, and I'll just say, Tom loved being mayor, but I think he was also appreciative of having this language in here, which gave him an opportunity to move on without disappointing too many people. Tom was a great mayor. Our current mayor is a great mayor. This is not about personalities, but I just think sometimes you get in these positions of leadership and you can't get out because no one else wants to run for the leadership position. So this forces a changeover in leadership, I think, at an appropriate time. And again, it doesn't mean that a mayor can't run for the council, can't sit on the council and run for mayor. So I think it's pretty flexible in those. They can still stay involved, whoever they are.
And-
I think it's pretty flexible in that regard.
Go ahead, Maura.
So the mayor did throw out to me the idea of 3-year terms, so it's concurrent with council seats. My comment to her was that we had done an entire analysis, which I did. I did a whole chart. I can remember doing this.
Yeah.
You don't want the mayor constantly running with the same council seats. So we picked 2 years so that they would run with gubernatorial and presidential elections. And my comment to her was, if I were to do anything, and I think this would be it might be a more substantial change than is allowed. If anything, I'd go from 2 to 4 years. So you have it's the same thought process, but it gives longer period of time where you don't transition people potentially. So that was the
So-
only other thought I wanted to throw out.
So Maura, would you suggest, and I know this is just discussion, would you suggest 2 4-year terms or 3 4-year terms?
I'm not opposed to long lengths. I just think that at some point, a transition is good in the leadership positions. So if it was,
Yep.
but I'm just saying the 4 years is the first discussion. I mean, that's,
How about you?
Yep, so I think, I like the 2-year terms. Well, obviously for all of the timing, right? The reason I like the 2-year terms is, excuse me, this elected position of the mayor that I truly support has more influence over the governance than the other 6 councilors, right? Because there's some of that inferred here in the charter, and there's some of it that's inferred by your rules of procedure. That being,
they were popularly elected too.
Right, so that being said, I think that 2-year period of review and reelection by the people is appropriate, because you're inferring an even higher amount of authority in that position than you do for the other 6 elected councilors. So that, I would support the shorter term.
The 2 versus the 4.
To roll it, right, and then do your 3 successives.
So I was curious on your end whether you appreciated the consistency for longer being more important to you.
I did appreciate the consistency, but you still could have a 6-year period there, right?
You could, yeah.
No, it's two successive or 3? No,
It's either 3 2 years or.
It's 3 2 years,
it was
yeah,
Talked
so you
about
still could have 6
2 4
years.
years, yeah.
All right, yeah.
Well, I mean, as long as we, I like term, I don't mind discussing, is it too short a length? Should we go, like, add more, they can serve longer, more terms? That I would discuss,
Okay.
if that's of interest to you. I do
And if-
think eventually that it's nice to make a change, but.
I don't feel strongly about it.
Yeah, I know,
Just to be
just-
clear, I wanted
okay.
to know if anybody else did, or if if we felt like we needed to have the conversation. It's one of
I
those
think
things that
it's
if not
working. It's
broke-
one of those,
We're
it's one of those, it
talking
ain't broke. I don't think we need to fix it
Okay.
right now.
Adding term limits for all elected positions like with the state?
Yeah, so it's the inconsistency that I wanted to point out. So do you want, do we want to go the other way and have term limits on counselors or school committee or whatever? And I don't, again, can of worms, not sure we want to get into that, so,
My concern is that nobody would run.
sure.
So just let me throw this out. They don't? I didn't.
yeah, they do.
I did not
Do you
support
see-
term
do you
limits
s-
at the state, and I don't to
No.
this day. It has
Yes, they
caused
do,
more
Sue. They have a
damage.
lot of
Do
trouble.
you do not support term limits at the state? Is that what you
I
said?
did not support, and I
But you
still
would,
don't support.
but if they said, we want to term limit the chair of the House, the House Speaker,
Yeah, I'd be fine with that.
like, the leadership positions are your problem, not the people. Yes, and Sue, they do have a lot of trouble finding people to run at both levels. You're just not behind the scenes watching them do it,
Yeah.
because they're pulling teeth to get people to run, typically.
All right, so
I agree, it's tough.
topic we can revisit. I just wanted to throw it out there for conversation. Didn't mean to drop a bomb. I did.
No, but
Sometimes I drop the bomb and leave. I can't leave right now, so.
I
I'm
think
with
for all-
Steve on this one.
for all of
Yep.
the reasons that were stated, I think this works and works well. It's, it can be up to 6 years.
Yep.
It's a shorter term, so it's tested more often by the people than the other positions.
Okay.
Yes, important point.
All right. So we got 4 minutes. So if we can, I want to get through section 3. We're not going to get to section 4. I think we just covered 301. So now we're on 302.1. Office of the Mayor shall become vacant upon. Does this, do we deal with some of the same vagueness of language? Anything there? Permanent physical or mental, I mean, whatever language we decide on that other one.
We just had the same discussion.
Yeah, we just had the same discussion. So whatever we decide there could apply here. 302.2. Same thing. 302.3. Seems like it's the same thing as the counselors. 303,
That's a shall, though.
Says shall.
It's a little different.
shall.
So, and it says at the next regular election. So if you take that parallel, this 302.3.
Back to
and go
302.3.
to the council vacancy, it may be a good starting point for discussion.
To just make the language consistent between the two. 303. 304.
One thing on 304, last sentence should state be capitalized.
After consultation,
Laws of the state inconsistent, should state be capitalized? Is it referring to the state of Maine?
He's in the last paragraph.
Yeah.
oh, I got it,
Last
okay.
sentence, last
Yep.
paragraph.
Laws of the state inconsistent with the provisions of this charter. Capitalized state, good.
And it's my understanding those type of provisions do not have to go up for referendum vote, because those were done even after you passed the one in January of 2011? Yeah, 11. Those corrections were made then as well.
All right, section 305. Yes, go ahead. Sorry, Larissa.
So under section 303, something that pops up in my position is the fact that positions.
Section 303.
Yep, I just wanted to point out that terms finish December 31st, and we don't have induction of people into office until the first meeting in the new year. So technically, we have a gap
There's nobody there.
where we don't have anyone in that office.
What could be a solution to that?
Is there language elsewhere that says that you serve until
Until the
your
next-
replacement is?
She says that
What
it's
is
the end of the
what's
calendar
section
year.
that talks about that? I don't know if that helps.
Well, right now, as Larissa is stating, that the term of office ends December 31st, right? Right, but if the proverbial thing hits the fan.
Sometime between January 1st and January
2nd, 3rd,
13th.
wherever that first Tuesday falls, that's when you're, yeah.
Oh, okay, it actually says, except that when, and I'm just looking at the mayor one, where is it? Except that when elected to fill a vacancy, the mayor shall hold office for the unexpired term or until a successor is elected and sworn. So that's where I was getting
Can a,
confused.
can
That
a,
really doesn't.
can
I
a
knew I'd
swearing
read
in,
it somewhere.
can a swearing in happen early? Can it happen to be effective January 1st?
We could swear them in December 31st.
Or
but
just-
it's always been held for the meeting, so they're sworn in public, in the council meeting with the camera and such under that.
But could they be sworn in at the last council meeting of December to be effective,
Well, but the term doesn't start until January 1st.
to be effective January 1st?
It's a good point.
Okay.
I did that.
It would just be nice, I know, I haven't had this situation yet, but I could envision it, that, New Year's Eve, January 1st, what hits the fan,
Yeah.
and whoops,
The-
I don't have the mayor
Kim's
in
disaster.
office, and I have 2 councilors that aren't in office yet.
It is your disasters.
Right? So I could be down to 4 city councilors and no mayor.
But just, so that, not to say that's what everybody agrees in, but it could be done, that a swearing in could occur at the last council meeting of December to be effective January 1st, and then that would solve the problem.
For some other cities, Lewiston, I think, and I'm not sure about Portland, do inauguration ceremonies in December.
Okay. So
Used to
we,
be an exit, all the people, wasn't there a big party at the end of the year for all the people that had served on committees? They were all,
we don't have money for that.
Not in mine.
Yeah, no money. No cap.
I'm just kidding.
not old enough.
But would this, would Larissa, or Steve, is what we're talking about here, would that be covered under this section 303? Or is it addressed somewhere else in the charter?
Let me go back and look at this universally for both the mayor as well as the council.
Okay.
Because that's the common issue.
Yeah.
Okay.
If we can swear them in prior to, we could still do it on TV, right, for ceremonial purposes, but if we can get them sworn in before January 1st and their office starts January 1st, I know who to call.
That resolves the issue. It's really the issue that needs to be resolved.
Well, the planning board, too.
Everybody.
You never know.
Well, what if
teasing
Kim's
you.
emergency happens and the council goes to the planning board and there's
Jack's gonna
nobody?
smack me.
All right, that's section 303, section 304. And I think I already covered that, and section 305 was compensation.
So, just so people know, they don't know, city councilors get $4,000 a year, mayor gets $5,000 a year.
25% more,
25% more.
right.
I don't think Tom ever
No issues there.
complained, except,
Nope.
it would be like a hell of a lot more money, not just a little bump. It would be this much more to really compensate me.
All right, so,
It's done twice a year. It's like the beginning of the year, January 1st, and then the first meeting in July is because the fiscal year changes.
We do the compensation.
I see that on the agenda twice a year to vote on salary.
We vote on what it's gonna be? No, we vote on it.
Oh, you vote on it in July, not January.
And for a public record, since I,
No, we vote on it in January.
At the organizational meeting, yeah.
Because you're newly elected.
Yep.
since I started on Budget Committee, which must have been 2013 or 14, that compensation hasn't changed, as I recall, so.
No, when Roland Cody was on, we changed it when if he was still here, he'd probably make sure it was going up by, something every year.
All right, that only gets us through the
Hustle
first
with
three
it.
sections. We did not accomplish our goal. We will, if it's okay, we'll just carry section 4 into the next meeting. But we will still try to keep the other agenda items on the meeting, so try to be prepared to talk about those. Yep. Yeah, 6 has its own meeting, so, we could skip through 6 and go back to 6, however we kind of feel like handling it at the next meeting, I guess maybe depending on how quickly we get through 4. It's not on the agenda, but do I have any comments? All right. I did not, I failed. I'll do better next time. All right, we'll consider the meeting